Hello, whisperers. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy tonight's tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It helps more than you know. Now, dim the lights, and let's begin tonight's story. I was fixing the south fence when the wind shifted and brought the city with it. Usually, it's nothing. Freight horns, traffic hum. But this time it carried sirens, long, drawn out, and wrong. The horses went still. Even the windmill stopped creaking, like the whole valley was holding its breath. I left the post half-driven and walked back toward the house. My porch boards groaned under my boots. Inside, the air felt too bright. I shut the lights, tuned the CB radio, and waited. Static. Then a clipped voice.
Civil disturbances. Multiple bite injuries. Shelter in place.
Bite injuries. That phrase didn't fit anywhere in my world. The sound of engines cut through the stillness. One car, fast, gravel spitting under its tires. It tore up my drive and crashed sideways into the ditch. Steam hissed from the hood. I grabbed my rifle from the wall, a Remington 700, and stepped outside. A man stumbled from the driver's seat, clutching a bleeding arm. His wife climbed out slower, trembling. "Stay there," I called. "He's been bitten," she shouted back. The man's sleeve was shredded. 2 rows of deep punctures like a human jaw had taken a chunk out of him. He swayed on his feet, eyes dull and unfocused. "Don't move," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'll help." I got a tourniquet from the truck, cranked it tight above the wound. His skin had gone gray. His wife whispered his name, Evan, like saying it could bring him back. Then he coughed blood. A string of it hung from his lips, trembling in the air before it snapped. His eyes locked on mine, and there was nothing human left in them. He sprang at me. We went down hard. He was stronger than he should have been, thrashing, teeth gnashing inches from my arm. I couldn't reach my rifle. I grabbed the knife on my belt and drove it into his neck. It felt like stabbing a sack of wet gravel. He didn't stop. I shoved free, ripped the rifle from its sling, and fired once. The shot cracked through the valley. The back of his head blew apart, and he dropped limp against the dirt. The woman screamed, high, sharp, broken, and then fainted. I stood over what was left of him, hands shaking so bad the bolt slipped when I tried to cycle it. The rifle was slick with blood. The echo rolled off the hills and came back softer, like the valley was whispering it back to me. I dragged his body to the brush pile behind the barn. The smell hit fast, hot metal, copper, and something else, something sweet. I didn't think. I just poured diesel, struck a match, and watched him burn. The fire's crackle was louder than it should have been. The wind carried the smoke toward the highway. I imagined people down there seeing it and thinking it meant safety. The woman, Marin, she said her name was, woke up by the fence, still pale but alive. I cleaned her up in the mudroom, told her not to leave it. She didn't argue. Back in the kitchen, the radio spat more broken chatter.
Containment failed. Reanimation confirmed. Head trauma only.
Reanimation. I sank to my knees on the cold tile. My pulse was hammering so hard I could hear it. Outside, gunfire echoed, sporadic, panicked. Not hunters, not soldiers, civilians. Then came a new sound, low, deep, and rolling. Dozens of voices moaning together somewhere beyond the valley floor. I loaded another magazine, checked the windows, cut the lights. When I stepped back onto the porch, the morning sun was cutting through the smoke. Down the dirt road where the fence line bent, I saw them. Figures, walking wrong, 9, maybe 10 at first. Then more behind them, spilling from the mist like shadows that had found bodies again. The horses were screaming in the paddock. The first one tripped a line I'd set years ago, fishing chime to warn of coyotes. The bell rang once, clear as glass. I raised the rifle and fired. The shot cracked and dropped the first man where he stood. The rest didn't stop. They just stepped over him. Spent brass clinked off the porch rail, and I worked the bolt again. You spent your life preparing for the end, I thought, but you never believed it would come walking up your driveway. The wind carried the stench of rot and smoke and something human underneath. The valley was waking up, and I was the only one left here to greet it. The light outside shifted from dawn to noon without me noticing. The smell of smoke clung to everything, the porch boards, my clothes, my hands, even the wind carried it, warm and sticky like something alive. Every so often I'd hear that chime at the end of the drive jingle once, faint, and I'd freeze. It didn't always mean something was there. Sometimes it was the wind, sometimes an animal. But every time I looked. Marin stayed in the mudroom, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest. I gave her a blanket and a glass of water. She barely touched either. She kept whispering a name, Evan, under her breath, like a prayer that had stopped working. I tried to pretend things were under control. Generator was good, water tanks full, food enough for months if rationed right. I'd been building for years for a day like this, but now that it was here, none of it felt real. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My throat was raw from breathing through my mouth. I'd never realized how loud silence could get when the world stops moving. The radio said nothing for hours. Then, out of nowhere, a voice cracked through the static.
All citizens north of I-90 evacuate immediately. Military containment failed. Repeat, containment failed.
That was Bozeman, 30 miles. Too close. I went to the barn and took stock of what really mattered. Ammunition, tools, fuel, batteries. 4 magazines for the rifle, 2 for the pistol, shotgun shells, maybe 20. Enough to make a last stand, but not enough to survive a siege. I dragged my welding tanks to the porch, tied them off with wire, and ran a long fuse made of oily rags. I didn't want to use it unless I had to, but I wasn't letting them take the house. As the day sank into evening, movement came from the tree line. Shapes again, dozens this time. They moved in silence except for the crunch of grass under feet. Their clothes were torn, faces smeared with dirt and dried blood. Some crawled, dragging twisted limbs that didn't look attached right anymore. I picked them off one by one until I realized it didn't matter. For every one that dropped, two more stumbled out of the mist. The gunfire drew them in. I could see them changing direction when I fired, moving toward the sound like it was something they needed. I stopped shooting, switched tactics. I turned off the porch light, cut the generator, and stood in the dark. The only sound was breathing, mine and theirs. When they got close enough, I lit the fuse. The blast ripped the night open. Fire rolled through the fence line, tossing bodies into the air like scarecrows. The horses screamed in the barn, hooves pounding against the stalls. I ran to calm them, but one had already kicked through the gate and bolted into the field. It didn't get far. The shapes in the dark moved fast when they had a target. I closed the barn doors, chest heaving. My ears rang from the explosion. Blood trickled from one. I reloaded in the flickering orange glow of the fire outside. Through the smoke, I saw one of them still crawling, half its face missing, eyes milky, jaw working. It reached for me like it remembered what hands were for. I stepped forward and put a round through the back of its skull. The flash painted the inside of the barn red for half a second, then gone. The quiet came back heavy. From the mudroom, Marin screamed. I ran for the door, slammed through it, and froze. The window above her head was shattered. A pair of gray hands gripped the frame. Marin swung a kitchen knife wildly, catching one wrist. The hand didn't pull back. It just kept reaching. I grabbed her by the collar and yanked her down as the glass gave way completely. The thing fell through, landing in a heap on the tile. The smell hit instantly, like rot and burnt meat. Its head snapped toward me, teeth bared. I jammed the rifle barrel under its chin and fired. The blast turned the mudroom into a blender of blood and drywall. Marin sobbed against the counter, her hands shaking. "Are there more?" she gasped. I didn't answer. I could hear them, outside pounding on the siding, dragging fingers across the windows. The house was surrounded. I shut the interior doors and locked them all. The thuds against the walls kept coming, irregular, frantic, growing louder by the minute. Every impact rattled through the frame like a heartbeat. Marin clutched her knife tighter. What do we do?" "Hold the line," I said. She stared like she didn't understand. "I mean, we don't let them in." The front door bowed inward once, twice, then cracked. A pale arm slid through the gap, reaching for the latch. I blew it off at the elbow, and the hand flopped onto the welcome mat, twitching like a fish. The smell of gunpowder hung thick. Marin gagged, pressing her sleeve to her mouth. "Go upstairs," I told her. "If they break through, you shoot anything that moves." Her voice was small. "What about you?" "I'll make sure they stay outside." Another crash. A window shattered near the living room. I swung the rifle around just in time to see 3 of them climbing through, one after another, covered in soot and blood. The first one reached for me, jaw unhinged, drool stringing down his chin. I fired center mass out of instinct. Nothing. He staggered, but kept coming. I adjusted up, and took the head. It dropped him instantly. The next two rushed at once. I grabbed the fire poker by the stove and slammed it into one's face, caving the nose and breaking the neck in a single wet crack. The last one lunged, teeth grazing my shoulder. I shoved the muzzle against its temple and fired. The flash burned my retinas white for a moment. When the ringing in my ears faded, I realized the house had gone quiet again. Outside, smoke curled through the open window. The field glowed faintly from the fire still burning at the fence line. Bodies lay scattered like dark scarecrows. Marin stood at the top of the stairs, pale and trembling, holding the pistol I'd given her in both hands. Are they gone? For now. I stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. The air was heavy with ash and rot. Beyond the flames, shapes still moved, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They weren't running, just walking, coming steady, endless. The fire wouldn't stop them for long. You can prepare your whole life, I thought, but once the world tips, it never stops falling. The generator sputtered once, then died for good. The ranch fell into silence, and the valley moaned back. The generator died with a cough and a metallic groan. Then silence. Real silence. The kind that makes your heartbeat feel too loud. The fire outside painted the windows orange. Every shadow in the house looked like it wanted to move. Smoke crept through the broken window and crawled along the ceiling. I turned to Marin. Her eyes were wide, glassy, reflecting the firelight. We can't stay, I said. She nodded barely. Where do we go? Up the ridge. If we get high ground, we can see the road. Maybe a way out. I grabbed the go bag from the hall closet, ammo, first aid, canned food, 2 bottles of water. She took the pistol and a flashlight. I slung the rifle, then opened the front door. Heat rolled in like a wave. The porch was slick with ash and blood. Beyond the fence, the fire had burned itself into a black scar, and through the smoke came movement, hundreds of them now. Some still smoldered, skin cracked and blackened, but they kept walking, always walking. Stay close, I said. We moved off the porch, staying low. The air burned my throat. Somewhere to my right, the propane tank in the barn must have blown, because the explosion flattened the wind. Debris rained down, boards, shingles, burning hay. The horses were gone. So was half the barn. The smell of cooked meat hung thick in the cold. We cut toward the tree line, stepping over what used to be people. One grabbed my boot as we passed, its fingers stiff but still clutching. I drove the hunting knife through its wrist and twisted until the grip loosened. The sound it made was thin, like air escaping a punctured lung. At the edge of the pasture, we crouched behind the old tractor. The moon hung low, bright enough to show what the fire missed. There were dozens more spilling down the hill from the road, faces slack, jaws working, feet dragging through the grass. Marin whispered, "They don't stop. They don't know how." We moved when the smoke drifted thick enough to hide us. Each step crunched frost and bone. My breath came hard through clenched teeth. The rifle felt heavier than it had any right to. Halfway across the field, a flare of motion in the dark. One of them, crawling, ribs split open like a peeled orange. It hissed when it saw us, dragging itself through the grass, fingernails snapping off in clumps of dirt. I didn't waste a bullet. One swing of the stock crushed its skull into the ground. The sound stuck in my ears long after. When we reached the tree line, the world narrowed to branches, smoke, and breath. The house was just a red glow behind us now. Marin stumbled, nearly fell. "We're almost there," I lied. A scream cut through the valley, high and human, not from the dead, someone else out there. It carried on the wind until it turned into a gurgle, then nothing. Marin looked at me, eyes wet. "Please tell me we're not the last ones." I didn't answer. At the ridge's base, we climbed an old cattle path. Loose gravel slid under our boots, carrying the sound farther than I liked. I risked one glance back. The horde had reached the yard. They moved like a tide, rolling over the porch, through the doors, through the fire. The house I'd built disappeared under their weight. The last thing I saw of it was the weather vane spinning in the heat before the roof caved. By the time we hit the top of the ridge, the horizon had turned the color of rust. The valley below glowed faintly, a field of moving shadows. I could hear them moaning even up here, a low, endless chorus that vibrated through the ground. Marion dropped beside me, gasping. "They'll keep coming, won't they?" "Yeah." She buried her face in her hands. "We can't run forever." I scanned the valley through the rifle scope. Far off, past the highway, a cluster of headlights moved slow and steady. A convoy, maybe. Military, or survivors. Hard to tell. "There," I said, pointing. "If we cut through the woods, we can make it before sunrise." She looked, then back at me. "What if they're not friendly?" "They're not dead," I said. "That's good enough." We sat there a moment, the wind pulling smoke across the ridge. My throat ached from the heat and ash. Then something moved behind us. Fast. A blur hit me from the side, teeth snapping inches from my neck. It had been waiting in the brush, silent. I rolled with it, using the rifle like a lever, shoving the barrel between its teeth. It thrashed, jaw grinding against the metal, hands clawing for my throat. Marin screamed and fired. The first shot missed, the second didn't. Half its skull vanished in a spray that misted my face. The body twitched twice, then went still. I pushed it off and sat there shaking. My hands were covered in blood that wasn't mine. Marin dropped the pistol and sobbed until she ran out of breath. For a long time, we didn't speak. The sky was turning pale now, dawn creeping up over the hills. From up here, the valley looked almost peaceful. You couldn't see the faces or the fire, just the movement, the slow, steady crawl of death spreading outward like water from a broken dam. I wiped my face, chambered another round, and looked east. "Let's move," I said. Marin hesitated. "Where?" I looked back at the smoke rising from what used to be my home. The red sky glowed through it, making it look like the whole valley was bleeding. "Doesn't matter," I said, "as long as it's not here." We started walking. The wind carried the faint sound of sirens. farther away this time, maybe miles. The moaning faded behind us, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The first 12 hours were over. And somewhere down there, hell waited.